another evening. What is it? Is it our 12th evening? Anyway, another evening. How about a chair for Prabhu? Wakey, wakey.
11th, Gurudev.
Is it 11? Oh, it's 11th. Sorry, you're right. It's 11th. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadeshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyas cha kripa sindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, devotees, so it is our 11th session on Vaishnava Etiquette. And we're still in section 2 or part 2, and it's other etiquette, and F, I think, preaching, right? Anyway, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So let's go through, preaching, this is a very important subject, obviously, and so there's quite a bit here, considerations in regard to preaching, and we have a few notes also, some interesting points, I think. So, first point, and this, of course, this is a famous point, our actions and behavior are our best preaching, because actions speak louder than words. As the saying goes, your actions speak so loud that I cannot hear what you're saying. Have you heard that before? I've never heard that one. You heard it? I never heard that one. Yeah. Anyway, it's a good one, actually. It's a good one. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada is called the founder Acharya of ISKCON, the founder who teaches by his activities, by his example. Acha means activities. There's Acha and Pracha. And there's a quote from Chaitanya Charitamrita, which we'll look at in due course, about Acha and Pracha. So yeah, Acharya, one who teaches by example. And number 2, it's I feel it's a very good point. Preaching means to change the heart, not simply to defeat someone intellectually. When you're preaching to the people, just the people, particularly in the street, just your typical people, they don't need or don't want and can't relate to, some subtleties or intricacies of philosophy and, yeah. Of course, that has to come sooner or later. But initially, at least in my experience, and so many devotees who I know, we have to just create a nice atmosphere in our interaction with the person or the people. Very friendly and sort of caring type of mood should be there. And that will influence people. So many people will be influenced by that more than some clever philosophical presentation, at least in the very initial stages particularly, and always for that matter. Actually, we should be nice to each other. Yeah. We should be nice to each other. And, there are people who I know of who you could say they're just regular people, and they met devotees, and the exchange was so nice, and the mood of the devotee was just so obviously interested and caring that the person couldn't get the devotee out of their mind. And they just felt, this is really such a wonderful person. And it brought them, further into Krishna consciousness. Or like the famous example of Jayananda Prabhu. One boy just came as a guest, just walked off the street and walked into Jayananda. They said, "Could you help out?" So they took out the rubbish in a van and dumped it in the rubbish dump and came back, and Jayananda was just preaching to him, but so nicely, so warmly, that the fellow, when they got back to the temple, thought, gosh, if the rubbish man is like this, then what are the others like? And he became a devotee, more or less on the spot. Yeah. So, okay, point number Roman 3, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't present our philosophy properly, obviously. And we should study Prabhupada's books and learn the philosophy and learn how to present it in ways which will stimulate people. And number 4, very good point, there's no need to read other books or go to other philosophers to learn how to preach. The humble servant of the spiritual master is the best preacher. Yeah. There's one story of devotees, in the 70s, distributing books in an airport in America. And some professional book salesman was watching them. And after a little while, he approached them and said, I see you're trying to sell the books, but I'm a professional book salesman. Maybe I can show you give you a few tips. So he took some books and he tried to distribute the books, and he couldn't. But the devotees had been distributing the books, and he was really impressed. So, anyway, here's an interesting little point number, Roman 5. The principle of preaching is nicely described by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Yena kena prakarena mana Krishna niveshayet. Somehow or other, in yena, kena, prakarena, in this way, in that way, in some way, just in any way, mana Krishna niveshayet. You must think of Krishna. Anyway, that's just a general principle in Krishna consciousness, really. So, all right, Romans 6. Yeah, to what degree we've really imbibed the philosophy and really sort of reflecting the philosophy or demonstrating. But even more so, the warmth and the friendliness and that mood of care and giving shelter and like that. So important. Preaching should be done in a humble attitude, not in the attitude of superiority. Well, when preaching, we should simply repeat the words of the spiritual master and deliver his message like a postman. And we should never think that we know more than the previous acharyas how to preach. We're empowered to the degree we're submissively preaching their words. Well, of course, that's true. But as we mentioned the other day, I think, Prabhupada also emphasized we should do it in our own words, not just like, sort of, they say, rote by rote, just like verbatim, but in our own words, with our own appreciations, our own realizations, we should repeat the message. Of course, this is now not about the first time you meet a person on the street. This is about preaching Krishna consciousness. So we must show compassion. One may need to even pay attention to a person's petty material problems, if necessary. Then Roman 10, we must speak the truth, but according to Desha, Kala and Patra, time, place and circumstance, actually, it means. Yeah, so this is like the idea of, in our own words, we have to evaluate the people who we're speaking to, particularly when you're out on the street and you're just dealing with people who are very deeply materially conditioned. You have to present the truth, but tailor the style of presentation, you could say, in such a way that it will appeal to whoever you are actually speaking to. Yes, you should have a balanced approach while preaching. Okay, well, this is what we were talking about. A good preacher will always understand the need for the devotees in different categories, or just the people. Just as in material life there are bankers, lawyers, doctors, and so on, in spiritual life there's a need for different types of devotees who, to one degree or another, need to be dealt with a little differently. While preaching to a particular person, our approach should be to advise what is best for his Krishna consciousness, which will vary, often at least, from person to person. There's a need for qualified brahmacharis, qualified grihastas, qualified vanaprasthas, qualified sannyasis, qualified brahmacharinis. And we should encourage a person according to where the person can make the best spiritual advancement. Okay. Basic etiquette must be followed when another devotee is preaching. We should not suddenly interrupt them. Don't speak while I'm interrupting. Famous saying. Yes, don't you dare speak while I'm interrupting. Basic courtesies, yes. New people should be made to feel at home. Particularly on Sundays, we should look after the guests and newcomers. That's important. While we preach to new people, we must always remember that preaching to devotees is equally, if not more, important. So we make newcomers feel at home, but regular devotees shouldn't be neglected. And an interesting point is that Srila Prabhupada instructed that GBC members should basically preach amongst the devotees and not really to the non-devotees. Yeah, that can be done by the other devotees, but GBC members should sort of look after the devotees. At outside programs, newcomers and guests may be given preference for asking questions. Right. Regular devotees may ask pertinent questions to create an atmosphere in which newcomers would be encouraged to put forward their questions. Yeah, like we have this practice of the questions sheet, sending out the question sheet. It's a really good approach. It's really good. Because I don't know how many times I've given class here, and the last, getting on for 40 years, 37 years, but really plenty of times. And back in the old days where we'd ask people just to put their hands up, how many times did we not get any questions? Plenty of times. But when there's a question sheet, I think you always get questions, because it's a very non-confrontational way of presenting a question. And as they say, because, put your hand up and speak, and then somebody laughs at your question. There's a saying, the only silly question is the one that is not asked. Yeah. But people can be very sensitive that they may be going to embarrass themselves, particularly if they're really new and they really don't know things. We should not advocate or preach breaking the laws of the land in the name of doing something for Krishna. Devotees should adhere to these laws too. Yes, definitely. We should not be sectarian. Respect all bona fide religions. Okay, so these are good points. Actually, they're really good points. They're just excellent points, in fact. And like I said, I wanted to address this point of acha and pracha. There's famous exchange between Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami is glorifying Haridas Thakur. And he says, Apane achara keha na kare prachara. Prachara karena keha na karen acha. Some behave very well, but do not preach the cult of Krishna consciousness, whereas others preach, but do not behave properly. Achara prachara namya, karaha dui karya, tumi sarva guru tumi, jagatira arya. You simultaneously perform both activities in relation to the holy name by your personal behavior and by your preaching. Therefore, you are the most advanced devotee in the world. That's Sanatana Goswami. Srila Sanatana Goswami appreciating Srila Haridas Thakur, Acha and Pracha. Some behave well but don't really preach well, or maybe at all, or much, something like that. Whereas others preach but don't behave well. But you, Haridas Thakur, you do both. So actually we want both. We want both. It's not just only activities, but like we saw with Srila Prabhupada, he was speaking so much and so nicely and always acting wonderfully. So here's some things from Srila Prabhupada. Act in such a way that they will see that we are of ideal character. This is a well-known Prabhupada quote. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, they should see that we are perfect gentlemen and gentle ladies, and not like hustlers or, tricky types of people. Actually just towards the end of the time Prabhupada was on the planet, and for the few years after, up till about 1980 or 78 or 9 or something like that, but after Prabhupada, devotees, particularly in America, but it also spread to other parts of the world. We were also doing it in England. They, in order to get more money for the books, which is nice, they developed a strategy which was just universally adopted, more or less, amongst the devotees. And it was called the change-up. And it was a big thing. It was just a really big thing. And on a certain level, it was very successful. Change-up means you're distributing a book, so take a book, yes, and so they give some money, and then the devotee says, oh, well, yeah, so now the person's going to give some money, and the devotee says, I've got a lot of change. Could you give a note, and I'll give change? So the person was going to give some change, but okay, all right, so now they give a note, like a $10 note. Maybe they were intending giving $1 or something. And so they give a $10 note, and the devotee gives 50 cents back. Is that okay? No. Another 50 cents. So in other words, trying to squeeze more money out of the people, and very successfully. The only problem was that people didn't like it. And so our movement, particularly in America, really particularly in America, got a really bad reputation for cheating people. Yeah. So, it worked on a certain level, that they definitely got more money than they would have otherwise, but it damaged the reputation of the movement. So here is Prabhupada again. We should never steal anything like money, food, water, gasoline, etc., just to enhance our service to Krishna. That is too much dangerous. And if we're caught, then all our work is finished. Just like in India recently, this Bal Yogi, Guru Maharaj Ji. Did you ever hear of him? Guru Maharaj Ji? Boy Guru, yeah. I mean, it was more some years ago, I think. Not so much recently. So he was detected by the customs authorities attempting to smuggle some small items into India. By this one tiny incident, his entire effort for preaching, even his rascal number one in his preaching is nonsense. Even so, the example is there. His work is ruined now, and he's practically finished, as the government will not grant him a passport to leave India. So we shall always be careful to avoid any kind of jeopardizing our high standing in the society by some foolish and small act of illegal stealing. Here's another totally different one, but really nice. Real business is preaching work. And if there's full attention on this matter only, all other businesses will be automatically successful. Here's an interesting one. Again, completely different. This is Prabhupada again. The tendency for solitude is a kind of reaction from our past material activities. But solitude is not very good for a neophyte. The best thing, therefore, is not to seek solitude in the beginning, but remain in the midst of pure devotees, so that even their attack of Maya, their association will protect us. If you are, however, always busy in the matter of preaching work, that is very, very nice. But to remain alone in a solitary place for a new man is not advisable. And of course, the example is there of Bharat Maharaj. Yeah, solitude. Somehow he decided he didn't want to go and join one of the many ashrams that were there in the forest. He wanted to have his own private ashram. But then there was no protection, because the devotees, I mean, there are different ways of looking at it, but one way is the devotees can be like a mirror, and you'll be able to see yourself. Means the devotees will tell you things. Yeah, like they would have told Bharat Maharaj. They would have told him, just leave this deer. Yeah. And that's a protection. It's a real protection, actually. So here we have some other quotations from here and there. Preachers should have compassion upon the innocent souls, but avoid offenders. Leadership is based on spiritual qualification, not on anything material. A mature, dedicated preacher makes the best leader. Now that's really true, actually. Preachers make better leaders than, the real manager types who are just more into sort of manipulating things. But preachers who are dynamic and spiritually empowered, they make the best leaders of the Krishna consciousness movement. Prabhupada said he knew the pulse of his disciples. Thus, in 1972, he sent a tendency for them to be too absorbed in management and not enough in preaching. He'd been telling his secretary that GBC men should not simply sit behind their desks and try to centralize power, but should become detached, take sannyas, and travel and preach to the devotees mainly. Now he had advised that they not give up their managerial burden, but follow his example of preaching and managing their GBC zones in a renounced spirit. Spontaneous service is encouraged in the visitor, by the sensitive, pure preaching of the devotee. Every guest should at least be engaged by hearing the glories of Srila Prabhupada, relishing prasad and chanting the holy name. So this is now from Leelamrita. It's a little pastime. So they're at Prabhupada and a group of devotees, they're at a sort of Hindu mela, I think Bhagavad Gita mela or something of that sort. And there's a Mayavadi sannyasi who's just got up to speak. So the sannyasi, Mayavadi, began speaking. Suddenly Srila Prabhupada looked at us and said, "Start kirtan immediately." So we got up in the middle of the sannyasi speaking and started kirtan. He was preaching impersonal philosophy and I could not tolerate it, Prabhupada said. Oh, yes. Krishna. Okay, now, devotees, we go on to the next section, which is number 3, which is all about prasadam. Yeah, there's quite a bit about prasadam. Anyway, let's get into it. Because we all like prasadam, don't we? Don't we? Yes. All right, let me, get my, notes out. Yes, prasadam. Oh, okay. Yeah, so we'll just go through the manual because there's loads of stuff there. And a lot of it's really good and really to the point. First and foremost, one should eat only prasadam. That is, food that has been offered to Lord Krishna with devotion. Well, you know what? There's our statement here, coming up right now, of the ideal. What's ideal food or ideal process? But Srila Vaishnava Chakravarti Thakur expands it a bit beyond what is stated in our manual. He says, best is, first of all, the food is grown by devotees. First of all. Then it is harvested by devotees and prepared, washed and cut or whatever by devotees, then cooked by devotees, then offered to the Lord by devotees, and then served by devotees. This is ideal. But then Prabhupada made the point that if we cannot grow our own different ingredients, then Prabhupada said that if you buy it in the market, if you pay the price for it, then the karma is removed. So it's okay. Although, it would be better if it was grown by devotees. And we should try to come as close to this ideal standard as is practically possible. Unless absolutely necessary for preaching or service, food cooked by non-devotees should be avoided. Because when people cook food, some of them goes into the food due to the concentration, and focusing on the process of cooking. And the classic example which is given is of how, at least a contributing factor in how Bhishma ended up on the opposite side in the battle of Kurukshetra to Krishna, who was his Lord, and to the Pandavas, who for years and years and years, Bhishma had been protecting them and making different arrangements. But then when the battle came, he was on the other side, and he physically attacked Krishna, and he physically attacked different of them. And one part of the reason for it was because he had eaten food cooked by Duryodhana. Because Duryodhana was really not a good person. In fact, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Duryodhana is an empowered incarnation of the personality of Kali Yuga. Kali, yeah. Duryodhana is an empowered expansion or incarnation, yeah. So his consciousness went into the food, and there were other considerations too, but that was one which influenced the thinking of Bhishma. So in the same spirit, all commercial food items like chocolates, ice cream, chips, biscuits, cold drinks, bread, etc., should be avoided at home. It's true. To guests, one may offer homemade foods and natural drinks like lemon water, fruit juice, etc. It's best. There's no doubt that it's best. Commercial items may be selectively had while traveling or in otherwise compelling circumstances. Selectively had. What does that mean? I select what I like? Is that it? Not exactly, but in some sort of mature and responsible way. Where the prasadam one is carrying with oneself is not sufficient, or as an addition, uncooked and raw foods like fruits, nuts, milk, etc. are preferable to commercially cooked items. Sometimes while traveling, or in the course of some preaching or service or professional work, one may be compelled to eat in a restaurant. One should select, if possible, a restaurant which is purely vegetarian, and even then be careful to order items which are without onion and or garlic. Anyway, in South Africa, I would say the likelihood of devotees not being able to get prasadam if they're traveling around wouldn't be that great. But in many countries it would be difficult. One should eat prasadam which is sattvic in nature and avoid foods that are rajasic, which means foods which are very spicy, oily, and rich. And then at home, bhoga must be offered in the proper way. Not as one devotee used to do, Om Tat Sat, thanks a lot. That was his offering. But it should, as much as possible, be offered nicely. Prasadam should not be wasted. Excess prasadam should be put on another plate before eating. Actually, excess prasadam should not be on your plate. You should just get, a manageable amount. And if something is exceptionally nice, then you can get some more if you can manage it. After everyone in the family has eaten, if prasadam is still left, it may be retained for some time for the next meal, if possible, or distributed outside somewhere. Prasadam should be eaten only with the right hand. The left hand is for touching other parts of the body. While serving prasadam, the serving spoon should not touch the plate or the half-eaten prasadam. One should eat prasadam in moderation and preferably at fixed times of the day. Overeating and eating wrong kinds of foods are not good for spiritual life and also for health. Controlling our diet will help us control our tongue, and this will help us in turn to control our senses. Overeating, undereating. I think you're all aware in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says we shouldn't eat too much or eat too little, sleep too much or sleep too little. Srila Prabhupada said, if you eat too much, then you may get diabetes. And if you eat too little, you may get tuberculosis. Prabhupada definitely said that. It might even be in the Bhagavatam, but it's somewhere. Before honoring prasadam, appropriate prayers should be chanted. Prasadam must be honored with a consciousness that it is Krishna's mercy and is non-different from him. Therefore, except when necessary for preaching, one should maintain silence. Hearing a lecture or a cassette at this time is also beneficial. In many places, there's a reading during prasadam. Many places, many temples. When guests visit the house, the bhoga that has been offered to the home deities becomes mahaprasadam, which should be distributed to all present in small quantities. Fresh hot prasadam should be served out as per requirements to all the guests, including guru and sannyasis. This is now 17, Romans 17. When senior Vaishnavas are present, we should patiently wait till they have begun eating, and only then we should begin eating, unless we're told otherwise. One should get up after finishing prasadam only when all have finished eating. That's not so important, really. Guru's mahaprasadam should not be distributed in the presence of newcomers. Well, it shouldn't be distributed to the workers, that's a fact, as I saw one devotee doing a few years ago. It should mainly be for the disciples, but it can also be for distributed to other devotees if they want. After one has begun eating prasadam, one should not touch anything else with the right hand. we should not distribute prasadam unless we have washed both hands. And finally, one should not take prasadam in view of karami public. For example, while walking down the streets or while in procession. As far as possible, prasadam should be honored either in a private place or where everyone else is taking prasadam. Okay. And then the next little section is about the kitchen. And anyone got any comments or questions so far about what we've been reading? Any objection? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much. I was wondering, when it comes to preaching, you mentioned Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur spoke about men being gentlemen and ladies being gentlewomen.
Right.
There's sometimes where we are put into a situation where it can become a negative in the sense that the person receiving the knowledge that we are trying to offer may not be so keen. And then naturally the devotee can become disheartened and one's reaction, needs to be managed. So in these difficult situations, how do we maintain our equipoised manner?
Yeah, well, of course, first of all, we got to try to present nicely so people become interested and, enthusiastically like that. But if people or a person is not interested, then we shouldn't become disheartened. Yeah, that's your question, how not to become disheartened. Well, the answer is we shouldn't become disheartened. We should take it that, there are different things. One is you can't win them all. We used to have, when we were distributing books and records, we would have competitions, first to 10. Yeah, or first to 10, who could distribute 10 books or records, more books, but records too. And then another thing was, how many people in a row can you get to take? And we would try to get 10. If you can get 10 people in a row to take, that was good. But, you can't win them all. So it's a consideration, sort of like no matter how hard you try, you can't win them all. And you have to, because, some of the conditioned souls, they're just in another space altogether, and you just can't get them to cooperate. So yeah. Therefore, we have to have that sort of, what was the word? Be kind of resigned to the fact that, it's like if you're distributing books or if you're preaching to people, you want the people to take the books or to, take up Krishna consciousness. But, not that you should become sort of disinterested, like don't care, but still you have to become able to appreciate that different people have different natures and some people, even Prabhupada, even Lord Chaitanya, couldn't get everyone to become a devotee. I mean, Lord Chaitanya, a lot, but even Prabhupada, you get some funny people. And what to speak about ourselves. But, so we have to accept that's part of being in the material world. When you go back to Goloka Vrindavan, everyone will take a book. Yeah. Everyone will take a set. And if you come back tomorrow, they'll take another set. Because it's the spiritual world. But the material world is different. But then at the same time, we have to try to, at least we can, or we should, try to take it as an impetus that I must focus more. Maybe try harder or try better, say. Try better. And pray more. Yeah. And try and be in a better mood more. These types of things. So for the devotees, failure is a real pillar for success. Yeah. Failure is not like just a source of depression or that sort of thing. So, yeah, we have to do like that. And if we do very sincerely, then whatever results come, we can accept this is Krishna's mercy. Yeah. There's a sort of, I don't know if it's a famous story, but a story I was told. Jayapataka Maharaj, great soul. He was in France. This is years ago. It might have been the 80s, but it was years ago. And he had to catch a flight. So, they got in the car and started driving. And there was some sort of traffic jam. And Maharaj was praying and calling out, Krishna, please help Krishna. And, for like half an hour he was really worked up about it, and all the devotees were worked up. And they got to the airport, and about half an hour before, a bomb had gone off, and the place was just, it was a shambles. So if they had got there on time, they might have been caught by the bomb. Yeah. So even though it appeared to be a type of defeat, but actually it was Krishna's mercy. Yeah. So sometimes Krishna's mercy comes in the form of, whatever we're doing, we do very well, or we're very successful. But sometimes Krishna's mercy comes in the form of not doing well, and in many other ways too. Yeah. But as long as we're trying our best sincerely, then whatever result comes by the grace of the Lord, we can take it that it's the mercy of the Lord, and therefore not be depressed, but rather be inspired. Yeah. How's that sound?
That sounds wonderful. So much in it.
Hare Krishna. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. I was just thinking of one class Radhanath Maharaj was giving, I think in Bombay, when his parents were visiting, about the changing thing.
Change up.
The change up, sorry.
Oh.
And he was talking about his dad. His dad had visited New Vrindavan, I think, while he was Pujari, and he was coming up and down the bullock cart and lying, and his father was like in a really bad condition, and he he had to leave New Vrindavan after some time, and he was in the airport going back, and he only had like a little bit of money, like maybe $10 or something to get the cab and things and go back. So he had like a little bit of change that he could have given from that $10, and some devotees approached him, and they asked him if he wanted a book, and he said, okay, I only have $10 though, I need to get the cab, so could you take like just a little bit? And they said, yeah, sure, and he gave them the 10, and then when he asked for it back, they said no. And there was like a little bit of a workout where he was like, I really needed to go, and the devotee actually punched him.
Really?
And knocked him out.
Oh my
he
gosh.
was unconscious, and the police came, and
Oh.
they said, we saw everything that happened, sir, when he came to, and we're going to arrest these two. And Radhanath Maharaj's father said, no, it's okay. I know these people, they're good people, the devotees. But I was just thinking about, how...
Okay. Wow. I never heard that one. Interesting.
Maharaj, there was one other question that I had. I was just thinking about relating to other or people that aren't devotees. Like before I came to Krishna consciousness, I remember walking to the shops, and everyone I would interact with, I would say, enjoy your day or something to that effect. And then when I came to Krishna consciousness, then I realized, enjoyment in the material world isn't really...
Not kidding.
Isn't that... I stopped saying it to people, and I kind of more focused on being kind and a pleasure to the devotees instead of others. And I've noticed, like, in my dealings outside now, there's not much reciprocation, and I feel like in some ways it's a bad example of, the devotees, or what a devotee should be like. How do we overcome these types of thoughts or patterns of behavior?
I don't quite get the idea. There's not much reciprocation.
Like, not much positive reciprocation between, like, myself and the other people, and it's not like a good example, I feel.
Well, I'd say that, you could wish them something Krishna conscious or more Krishna conscious. Yeah. Something which they might be able to relate to, but as Krishna conscious, rather than just have a nice day or something. Something like that. Wish them all the best. Or anyway, think of some nice thing to say which is Krishna conscious, which they're going to be able to accept.
Hare Krishna, about the food that is grown is supposed to be the best,
Right.
by devotees. Should you fetch from the store? Prabhupada said, if you pay the price, then karma is taken away.
Right.
What in the event of us receiving donations?
Well, that's even better, because it's donated. It's given from the heart. That's great. Yeah. What happened to the mic there? Okay. Okay. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.